decided to renovate our family home with the $1 million you inherited," my husband announced with a sly grin. What? I was so shocked that my voice squeaked. My father had passed away, and indeed, I had inherited $1 million. However, I hadn't told my husband about it. I had been considering divorce due to his overbearing behavior, and even without that, I thought it would be troublesome if he, who was always so greedy for money, found out about the inheritance. But how did he know? When I confronted him about how he knew about the inheritance, he shockingly admitted to threatening my mother to reveal the information. What a despicable man! Fury rose within me as I protested to my husband. However, with a mocking smile, he retorted, "Whatever you say. I've already signed the contract. No matter how much you scream, it's pointless now. My name is Caroline. I'm 28 and work at a major bank. I've always had a strong desire to get married, but my busy job left me with little time to meet someone. So, I bravely registered at a matchmaking agency. Thanks now. I met a man named Robert, a year older than me. Robert was a delivery driver with a cheerful personality and an entertaining way of talking, which made it a pleasure to be around him. I work in a male-dominated environment, so I don't get to meet many women. I'm genuinely happy to have met a wonderful and reliable woman like you." Thurlight, Robert said, blushing. "I feel the same way. It's an honor to hear you say that." I responded, "Would you like to date me?" Of course, with the intention of getting married. Rebate proposed. I happily accepted, and our relationship progressed smoothly. 3 years ago, we got married. Initially, I believe we were a very loving couple. I earned more than Robert, but he often complimented me, saying, "Caroline, you are truly amazing. Such a career woman." But 3 years after our marriage, Robert's kind demeanor changed drastically. He started making sarcastic remarks like, "Must be nice for you earning such a high salary." And it wasn't just Robert that changed. My once kind in-laws started treating me arrogantly. Initially, they had been really kind to me. "Oh, Caroline, you work at a major bank. That's impressive. You must have worked really hard. We're genuinely happy that our son married someone like you." "Thank you. I'm just grateful to have married Robert. It feels like we're going to have a great relationship with you," my mother-in-law said, smiling warmly. Both in-laws seemed supportive, watching us with tender eyes. Although mother-in-law issues are often discussed in society, I thought it didn't concern me. But eventually, their true nature became apparent. "Arlene, you earn a good salary, don't you? Give us some. I want a designer bag. It won't hurt if you help us out once in a while." My mother-in-law demanded as if it were a given, "But I just bought you a dress for your birthday recently. And I don't lend or borrow money, even from family." I responded. Upon my refusal, both in-laws were enraged. "How dare you? We only approved of this marriage because you work at a major bank. We actually despise you. We're sick of you always voicing your opinions so clearly." My mother-in-law yelled, "That's right. What use is a daughter-in-law who doesn't give us money? Giving gifts for birthdays is a given. We're telling you to give us money. Even after asking for so long, you still won't provide. You're the worst daughter-in-law." My father-in-law berated me, echoing his wife's sentiments. Robert only nodded in agreement to the harsh words of his parents and did not defend me at all. On top of that, he frequently ordered takeout and purchased expensive furniture on a whim, saying, "You earn well, so this should be okay." It would have been fine if he used his own money, but his salary wasn't enough, so I always ended up covering the expenses. Given the ongoing mistreatment from Robert and my in-laws, it was only natural that I started considering divorce. We didn't have children yet, so I felt the hurdle for divorce wasn't that high. I promptly began preparations for the divorce. When I conveyed my desire for a divorce to Robert, he kept dodging the issue and refused to face the situation head-on. "What divorce? I'm tired today. I'm going to bed." "Wait, Robert, I want to discuss our divorce seriously today." Ignoring my plea, Robert quickly retreated to the bedroom. He persistently avoided discussing the divorce with me. During this time, I received a call from my mother. "Hello, Mom. What's up?" "Caroline, listen calmly. It's about your father." Urging my mother, a recent health checkup revealed that my father had an illness and had to be hospitalized immediately. "Got it. I'll rush to the hospital right away." I quickly began preparations to leave. As I was about to depart, Robert inquired about where I was going, and I informed him about my father's situation. However, he responded with a disinterested, disappointed with Robert's indifferent attitude, especially since it was about his father-in-law. I prioritized visiting my father at the hospital without giving Robert any more attention. Upon arrival, I joined my mother to hear the doctor's diagnosis. It turned out my father had malignant cancer, and his days were numbered. Both my mother and I were shocked. We debated whether to inform my father about his prognosis, but knowing that he would want full transparency regarding his health, we decided to tell him. I returned home, utterly devastated. Upon seeing my downcast face, Robert insensitively asked, "Went to your father's hospital, huh? So how bad is it?" Infuriated by Robert's tone, I still shared the grave news about my father, fixed in response. Robert smirked and said, "Oh, weren't you talking about divorce? If you want to stress out your already ailing father with our divorce, listen, I'm up for it anytime." His deplorable remark made my feelings for him sink to an all-time low. However, I genuinely wanted to avoid causing additional strain to my father, although Robert kept claiming he was ready for divorce with a smirk. Discussing the specifics always left him smirking even more. Considering my workload and not wanting to deal with the divorce at the moment, I prioritized being there for my father. Not bringing up divorce anymore made Robert think he'd won. His attitude worsened. "So, about your father's inheritance, how much is there? I'm his son-in-law. I should get something too, right? Can't wait. Plenty absurd. My father is still alive. How can he even talk like that? Shut up. Don't raise your voice at me." No matter how much I protested, it seemed to have no effect on Robert. His constant speculation about what happened after my father's passing disgusted me, so I started staying at my parents' house. I explained to my mother that I'd stay there for a while since it was closer to the hospital. After some time, my father passed away after his battle with the illness. He departed this world peacefully, as if he were asleep. My mother and I shed so many tears it felt like we'd run dry. But with funeral preparations to be made, we couldn't stay immersed in our grief. I informed Robert about my father's passing and the funeral date over the phone. Although I still wanted to divorce, I felt obligated to notify him, as we were still technically married. "Hey, so your father finally passed away? Sorry for your loss. I guess. I don't feel like attending the funeral. It's too much of a hassle." Though I had suspected it, Robert showed no signs of sadness at all. I had expected he would at least attend the funeral, but it seemed even that was too much for him. Seeing him act like this, I not only did I lose feelings for him, but I started to detest him. I regretted marrying a man who had hidden such a nature. "Huh, do as you please," I responded, surprised by my own icy tone. "Why are you so mad?" "Oh, and what I really want to know is about the inheritance." But unable to stand his sneering laughter, I interrupted Robert's words and hung up the phone. In the end, Robert didn't attend my father's funeral. There were people who called him heartless, but I thought it better he didn't come and tarnish my father's last rites. In fact, I felt relieved he wasn't there. After the funeral, a meeting was soon arranged among the relatives, including my mother and myself, to discuss the inheritance. There were discussions about who'd inherit what, but since my father had made some decisions during his illness, everything was settled smoothly. Finally finding some closure, I decided to return home after a long while. Upon seeing me, the first thing Robert blurted out was shocking. "Hey, long time no see. I've decided to use the $1 million you inherited to renovate the family house." "What?" I was so surprised my voice broke. I hadn't told Robert how the inheritance discussion had turned out. How did he know about the $1 million? And what was he talking about using it for home renovations? Still in shock, I questioned Robert. "What are you talking about? I know nothing about such a huge amount." Robert replied with a laugh. "I talked to your mother. I kind of threatened her a little, saying if she didn't tell me about the inheritance, I'd divorce you." She quickly spilled the beans, and it turns out Robert had blackmailed my mother into revealing details about the inheritance. I hadn't informed my emotionally fragile mother about the mistreatment I endured from Robert and his parents, or that I was considering divorce. Naturally, my gentle mother, fearing for her daughter's marriage, had given in to Robert's threats. "You're despicable. Threatening my mother to find out? That's a dirty trick." I raised my voice without realizing. "Don't care. I've already signed the contract for the renovations using that $1 million. "She did what?" "Yep. Lucky me for getting my hands on that money. The good thing we're not divorced yet." Robert replied smugly. While I was busy with the funeral and other tasks, Robert had already contracted the renovation using the inheritance. I was at a loss for words. You're now obsolete, but I'm generous, so I'll give you two options: either live with my parents or get a divorce. Robert's smirk was utterly repulsive. I sighed deeply and calmly replied, "I choose divorce, but don't regret it." Robert laughed dismissively. Like I'd regret anything? You're such a loser. Saying that, Robert handed me a lawyer's business card. Rectimuis. From now on, we'll handle everything through this lawyer. It's a case sure to transfer the inheritance to my bank account. I silently packed my things and left. Even as I was leaving, Robert kept insisting, "Don't forget to transfer the inheritance." When I told my mother about everything that had happened, she seemed surprised. She hadn't realized Robert and I were on such bad terms. She also apologized for telling Robert about the inheritance. "It's okay, Ram. It's my fault for not telling you everything. Besides, Robert threatening you is the worst part," I said, and then asked if I could stay at our family home until I found a new place. She readily agreed. The next day, Robert made numerous calls to me, all of which I ignored. Then, Robert showed up at my parents' house, repeatedly ringing the doorbell and making a racket. So. I tried to ignore him, but Robert wouldn't leave and kept shouting loudly outside, "Hey, open up! I know you're in there." Overwhelmed by his aggressive behavior, my mother suggested, "Carolyn, maybe you should just talk to him to avoid causing a disturbance for the neighbors." I doubt it'll be a productive conversation, but if things escalate, we'll call the police, okay? Certainly, at this rate, Robert wouldn't move away from the front door. Reluctantly last, I opened the door, but not fully, leaving the security chain latched. "Stop it. This is really bothersome. Caroline, when am I getting that $1 million? You said you'd transfer it to my account. I can't pay for the renovation." As he shouted, he tried several times to shake the door and break the chain. I calmly replied to Robert, "It's expected." "What do you mean expected?" Robert looked puzzled at my response. I confronted him with the truth. What I inherited was my father's vacation house. "It's not in cash, so I can't transfer it to you." Robert's eyes widened in shock, but then I had something that surprised me too. How on earth were you able to contract a renovation for $1 million? Normally, they wouldn't agree to such a contract without evidence of the funds. "Well, my relative owns a construction company." I told them I'd be getting $1 million soon, so they waived the usual checks. Robert answered, looking flabbergasted, "That's the case. But remember when I warned you before we decided to divorce? I did warn you properly. You've got to be kidding me. $1,000. I plan to pay the rest in installments, but now I can't. What am I supposed to do?" Robert, in a state of panic, continued to make a fuss. "Even if it's not in cash, hand over that $1 million vacation home. We're still married, right? You have several misconceptions." "It's Robert. Inherited property isn't communal property. It's all mine. Not a penny goes to you. And by the way, we're not a couple anymore. We're complete strangers." Upon hearing this, Robert's face went from a look of despair to beet red, and he started screaming louder than ever. "Don't play games with me. I'm canceling the divorce. Just hand over the inheritance right now." As he shouted, Robert tried to reach through the gap in the door to grab me. Seeing this, my mother quickly called the police. Robert quickly retracted his arm when he heard my mother talking to the police, but then smirked unexpectedly. "After all, I don't need you," he said with a laugh, then fled the scene. After Robert ran off, the police arrived. Thanks to the video footage from the doorbell camera, it looked like the police were going to take action. But they advised me more than anything else to protect myself and in the future, not to entertain Robert no matter what. They told me to keep the doors locked and, if necessary, pretend I wasn't home. I received another call from the police 3 days later. It was regarding the documentation related to my father's real estate. In truth, when I returned to my parents' house after divorcing Robert, I placed my father's real estate documents in my bag, but they had disappeared. When I went to the police station after being informed that the documents were found, Robert was there. The thief who stole the documents was Robert. While I was preparing to leave our house, Robert had stolen them from my bag. "Robert, what's the meaning of this? Explain yourself," I demanded, exasperated. With a sulky face, Robert tersely replied, "You thought that since I inherited $1 million, there might be some cash in my bag, didn't you? So when you were snooping around, you found some documents that looked important and thought they might be related to the inheritance. So you took them?" Robert explained. Apparently, he hadn't looked at the documents closely at that time. only after hearing from me that the $1 million was not in cash, but a vacation house. Did he realize that the documents he took were the property title of that house? Then Robert, with the assumption that selling the title would convert the property inheritance to cash, had taken it to a real estate agent along with my in-laws to initiate the selling process. But when I brought it there, that realtor told me that since the title is still under your father's name, they can't sell it. Right, since we had just had the inheritance division discussion, I was still in the process of finding a notary to transfer the title to my name. The title was still under my father's name. However, even if the inheritance had been finalized, the property wouldn't be under Robert's name but mine. So it wouldn't have been easy to sell anyway without my consent. When I shouted at them, insisting they buy it because it was my father-in-law's property, they called the police on me. It seems that the employees found Robert's aggressive demeanor suspicious and reported it. As I stood in shock, Robert began making ridiculous claims to the police officer. Look, I was just trying to sell it on her behalf. I didn't steal anything. I haven't done anything wrong. Please let me go. Robert, who had previously admitted to taking the documents, was now desperately making nonsensical arguments. That's not true. I didn't ask him to sell anything. He stole it on his own. I stated calmly to the police officer before turning to Robert. For starters, the documents you stole were just copies, not the originals. Even if you tried hard, you wouldn't have been able to sell them. You set me up. Don't play games with me, Robert shouted, spitting in rage. I coldly replied, "What are you even talking about? You stole on your own, and now all you do is spout nonsense. Just face the consequences of your criminal actions." Trevor bit his lip in frustration. And so, Robert was arrested for theft due to the loss of the $3,000 deposit and the news of Robert's arrest being broadcasted. My in-laws, now exposed as the parents of a criminal, were forced to move out of their town. Later on, for some reason, they seemed to bear a grudge against the real estate agency that had reported Robert and began making harassing calls and spreading rumors. The real estate agency, understandably furious, sued them for obstructing business and attempted fraud since they tried to sell property they knew wasn't theirs. But to avoid a court case, my in-laws had to pay a significant amount in damages. In their desperation, they called me for help. "Caroline, please. We spent all our savings on the deposit, and now we've taken on debt to pay the settlement. We can't live like this." My ex-mother-in-law's voice was frantic, but I felt no sympathy. "Why are you asking me for help? I'm divorced from Robert, and as far as I'm concerned, you're strangers to me now." In response, she desperately pleaded, "Bart, you're well off, aren't you? Can't you spare some money? We'll pay you back, promise." You really think I'd believe that? I'm ending this call. Don't call me again. I thought I heard a cry of despair from her. Then I blocked both their numbers. Since Robert knew where my parents lived, I decided to sell my family home and moved with my mother for safety. As for the $1 million vacation house, I put it back on the market and it was sold without issue. My mother and I now live peacefully, cherishing the memories of my father.